My stepson lied in court. He didn't know I had the recordings. The courtroom was dead silent except for the soft whir of the air conditioning and my stepson Tyler's voice cutting through the tension like a knife. He screamed at Emma and Jake constantly, Tyler said, his 16-year-old voice steady and convincing as he sat in the witness chair. Sometimes he'd grab Jake by the arm so hard it left marks. Emma would cry herself to sleep because she was scared of him. My jaw clenched involuntarily. Emma is 7. Jake is 5. They're my biological children, and every word coming out of Tyler's mouth was a carefully crafted lie. I watched the judge, Honorable Margaret Chen, scribble notes while Tyler continued his performance. My ex-wife Sandra sat at the plaintiff's table, dabbing her eyes with a tissue in what I'd learned over 8 years of marriage was her signature move when she wanted sympathy. Her attorney, some hotshot from downtown who probably charged $500 an hour, nodded encouragingly at Tyler. Can you describe a specific incident? The attorney asked. Tyler shifted in his seat, and for a split second, I saw him glance at Sandra. Just a quick look, but I caught it. Yeah, about 3 weeks ago, on a Saturday morning. Jake spilled cereal on the kitchen floor, and Dave just lost it. He grabbed Jake's shoulder and shook him while yelling about being more careful. Jake was terrified. Saturday morning, 3 weeks ago. March 18th. I remember that morning perfectly because it was the day I'd installed the new security system in our house. The same system that had been recording everything in our kitchen, living room, and hallway for the past month. The same system Tyler didn't know about. My current wife Lisa sat beside me, her face pale as she listened to her son testify against me. We'd been married for 2 years, and Tyler had been testing boundaries since day one. At first, it was typical teenage stuff, missed curfews, attitude, pushing back against house rules. But over the past 6 months, things had escalated. Money going missing from Lisa's purse. Lies about where he'd been after school. The final straw was when I caught him going through my home office, photographing documents related to the custody case. That's when I installed the cameras. My attorney, Robert Martinez, passed me a note, stay calm. We'll get our turn. But Tyler wasn't done. Dave drinks too much too. Like, every night after work. And when he's drinking, that's when he gets really mean. He told Jake he was stupid and would never amount to anything. Emma stopped wanting to go to his house because she was afraid of him. The lies were so detailed, so specific, that if I didn't know better, I might have believed them myself. Tyler had clearly rehearsed this testimony, probably with Sandra coaching him. The drinking allegation was particularly clever, something impossible to disprove, something that would stick in the judge's mind even without evidence. Judge Chen looked at me over her glasses, and I could see the doubt creeping into her expression. Before today, this custody hearing had been going reasonably well. Sandra's complaints about my parenting had seemed petty and vindictive. But Tyler's testimony was changing everything. A seemingly neutral witness, a teenager with nothing to gain, describing abuse in heartbreaking detail. Except Tyler did have something to gain. Something I discovered 3 days ago when I reviewed the recordings and found the conversation that would change everything. The conversation where Sandra promised Tyler $5,000 if he helped her win the custody case. The conversation where they planned every lie he was now telling under oath. The cross-examination was brutal to watch. Sandra's attorney, David Kellerman, had clearly prepared Tyler well. Every answer was delivered with just the right amount of hesitation, not too polished, but not uncertain either. The kid was a natural performer. Tyler, I know this must be difficult for you, Kellerman said, his voice dripping with fake compassion. But you understand how important it is to tell the truth about what you've witnessed, don't you? Yes, sir. Emma and Jake can't protect themselves. Someone has to speak up for them. Lisa's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tight. I could feel her trembling. She genuinely believed she was watching her son do something heroic, standing up for 2 vulnerable children against their abusive father. The betrayal cut deeper than Tyler's lies, my own wife doubting me, even if she didn't realize it yet. Has your stepfather ever threatened you directly? Kellerman continued. Yeah, actually. Tyler's voice dropped, and he looked down at his hands. Last month, when I tried to tell him he was being too rough with Jake, he got in my face and said if I didn't mind my own business, I'd regret it. Said he could make my life very difficult. March 22nd. I knew exactly what he was referring to, and it was nothing like what he'd just described. That was the day I'd confronted him about the missing $60 from Lisa's wallet, money I'd later found in his backpack along with a receipt from GameStop. When I'd told him there would be consequences for stealing, he'd smirked and said I couldn't prove anything. That conversation was also recorded. And after he made this threat, did his behavior toward Emma and Jake change? Kellerman asked. It got worse. Like he was showing me what would happen if I said anything. Judge Chen was writing furiously now. I watched my chances of maintaining custody of my children evaporating with every word. The preliminary custody arrangement had me keeping Emma and Jake 4 days a week, including weekends. Sandra wanted to reduce that to every other weekend, supervised visits only. At this rate, she might get exactly what she wanted. My phone buzzed quietly in my pocket. A text from my private investigator, Karen Walsh, found more. Check your email when you can. More evidence I probably wouldn't need. The recordings from March 24th were already damning enough, Tyler and Sandra planning this entire charade while I was supposedly at work. Except I'd come home early that day with a migraine and heard everything through the kitchen surveillance system I'd installed. Tyler, in your opinion, do you believe Emma and Jake are safe in their father's custody? Kellerman asked. Tyler looked directly at me for the first time since taking the stand. There was no remorse in his eyes, no guilt. Just cold calculation. No, sir. I think they're in danger every time they have to go to his house. That's when I saw Sandra's mistake. She was smiling. Just slightly, just for a second, but she couldn't help herself. She thought she'd won. Martinez scribbled another note, this is perfect. The more dramatic he gets, the better for us. He was right, of course. Tyler was overselling it now, adding flourishes that made his testimony sound rehearsed. But I wasn't sure Judge Chen was picking up on the inconsistencies yet. No further questions, Kellerman announced. Judge Chen looked at Martinez. Mr. Martinez, do you wish to cross-examine the witness? Martinez stood slowly, straightening his tie. Just a few questions, Your Honor. This was it. The moment we'd start dismantling Tyler's house of lies, brick by brick. Martinez approached the witness stand with the measured pace of a man who held all the cards but wasn't ready to play them yet. Tyler straightened in his chair, probably expecting softball questions or maybe an aggressive attack he'd been coached to deflect. Tyler, you mentioned that the incident with Jake and the cereal happened on Saturday morning, March 18th. You seem very certain about that date. Do you have a particularly good memory for dates? Tyler's eyes flicked towards Sandra's table. I guess. I mean, it was pretty traumatic, so it stuck with me. I see. And you said this happened in the kitchen? Yes, sir. What time of day, approximately? Maybe around 9 in the morning. We were having breakfast. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. You live in that house, Tyler. Can you describe the kitchen layout for us? I watched Tyler's confidence waver slightly. This wasn't the line of questioning he'd prepared for. It's normal. There's an island in the middle, counters along the walls, the table by the window. The table by the window. Good detail. Now, on this particular Saturday morning, March 18th, where exactly were you when this alleged incident occurred? I was getting juice from the fridge. So you had a clear view of the breakfast table? Yeah. And you're certain it was March 18th, around 9 a.m., in the kitchen? Yes. Tyler's voice was getting smaller. Martinez walked back to our table and picked up a manila folder. Your Honor, I'd like to present Exhibit A. My heart started pounding. This wasn't what we planned. We were supposed to save the recordings for later, let Tyler dig himself deeper first. But Martinez had 23 years of courtroom experience, and I trusted him. What is the nature of this exhibit, Mr. Martinez? Judge Chen asked. Security footage and audio recordings from the defendant's residence, Your Honor. Legally obtained from the defendant's own security system, installed on his property for protection purposes. Sandra's attorney shot to his feet. Objection. We weren't notified of any recordings. The recordings were disclosed in discovery last week, Your Honor, Martinez replied smoothly. Mr. Kellerman's office acknowledged receipt. I saw Kellerman rifling through papers, his face growing red. Sandra was leaning forward, whispering urgently to him. Tyler had gone completely pale. The objection is overruled, Judge Chen said. Proceed, Mr. Martinez. Tyler, I want to revisit your testimony about March 18th. You stated that my client grabbed Jake by the shoulder and shook him while yelling about spilled cereal. You said this happened around 9 a.m. in the kitchen, and that you witnessed it clearly while getting juice from the refrigerator. That's right. Martinez opened the folder. Your Honor, this is a time-stamped recording from the defendant's kitchen security system, March 18th, 8:47 a.m. to 9:23 a.m. The courtroom's audio system crackled to life, and suddenly we could all hear the sounds of that Saturday morning. Jake's voice, cheerful and innocent. Dad, can I have the dinosaur cereal? My voice, patient and warm. Sure, buddy. But let's finish your eggs first, okay? Emma giggling about something. The normal sounds of a peaceful family breakfast. Then we heard the spill, Jake's small, followed by the sound of cereal hitting the floor. It's okay, Jake, my recorded voice said. Accidents happen. Emma, can you grab some paper towels while I help Jake clean up? I can help too. Jake's voice, excited, not terrified. That's my big helper, I said. We'll have this cleaned up in no time. No yelling. No grabbing. No shaking. Just a father patiently helping his 5-year-old son clean up spilled cereal. Tyler was gripping the arms of the witness chair so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Now, Tyler, Martinez continued as the recording played, I noticed something interesting. Do you hear your voice anywhere in this recording? Silence from the witness stand. That's because according to this recording, you weren't in the kitchen that morning at all. In fact, the bedroom audio indicates you didn't wake up until 10:47 a.m. that day. Sandra was frantically scribbling notes and passing them to Kellerman, who looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. So I have to ask you, Tyler, Martinez said, his voice still calm but carrying the weight of absolute certainty, if you weren't even awake when this alleged incident occurred, how exactly did you witness it? The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Tyler's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I could practically see his 16-year-old mind racing, trying to find an exit from the trap he'd walked into. Maybe I got the date wrong, he finally stammered. Martinez nodded as if this was perfectly reasonable. Of course. Dates can be confusing. So when did this incident with Jake and the cereal actually happen? I don't remember exactly. But it happened. Maybe it was a different day. I see. Well, let's try a different approach. Martinez returned to the folder. You also testified that my client drinks heavily every night and becomes verbally abusive toward the children when intoxicated. You said he called Jake stupid and told him he'd never amount to anything. Do you recall when that occurred? Tyler's eyes darted around the courtroom like a trapped animal. It happened multiple times. Multiple times. Can you give me one specific date when you witnessed this behavior? I can't remember exact dates for everything. That's understandable. But surely you can remember one instance clearly enough to place it within a week or so. Lisa's grip on my hand had become almost painful. I could see the realization dawning on her face as she watched her son crumble under cross-examination. The woman I loved was watching her child exposed as a liar in open court, and I was the one causing it. The guilt was eating me alive, but Emma and Jake's faces flashed in my mind. My biological children, who might disappear from my life forever if I didn't fight back. Maybe 3 weeks ago. Tyler said weakly. 3 weeks ago. So around March 24th. Yeah, maybe. Martinez smiled, and I knew he was about to deliver the killing blow. Your Honor, I'd like to present Exhibit B. This is a recording from March 24th, beginning at 3:47 p.m., when my client arrived home early from work. The audio system crackled again, and I heard my own voice from that afternoon, Lisa. I'm home early. This headache is killing me. Lisa's voice, oh honey, you sound awful. Go lie down, I'll bring you some ibuprofen. Then Tyler's voice, clear as day, is he staying home? Yeah, he's got a migraine. Why? Sandra wanted to go over the testimony stuff again. We were supposed to practice while he was at work. My stomach clenched as I relived that moment. I'd been halfway up the stairs when I heard Sandra's voice coming from the kitchen. We'll have to be quick then, Sandra's voice said through the courtroom speakers. Tyler, you're doing great, but remember, specific details sell the story. Don't just say he yelled at Jake. Say he grabbed him, shook him. Give them something visual. What if they ask for dates? Pick recent ones. March 18th for the cereal thing, that's specific enough to sound real but not so recent they'd remember it perfectly. Judge Chen had stopped writing and was staring at the witness stand with an expression I couldn't quite read. But what if Dave finds out I'm helping you? Tyler's recorded voice continued. He won't. And remember, Tyler, this is for Emma and Jake's own good. Sometimes we have to bend the truth to protect children from bad situations. And you'll really pay me the $5,000. The day the custody order is signed, you'll have your money. Plus, think about it, with Dave out of the picture more, your mom will be happier. Your home life will be more peaceful. Martinez stopped the recording. Tyler, is that your voice we just heard? Tyler was shaking now, his face flushed red. I can explain. Is that your voice discussing payment for false testimony with the plaintiff in this custody case? Your Honor, Kellerman jumped up, I need to request a brief recess to confer with my client. But Sandra was already on her feet, her composure completely shattered. This is entrapment. Those recordings were made without consent. Actually, Martinez said calmly, my client has every legal right to record conversations in his own home in this state. One-party consent law. Judge Chen's gavel came down hard. Ms. Patterson, sit down. Mr. Kellerman, your objection is noted and overruled. I looked at Tyler, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something almost like pity for him. He was 16 years old, manipulated by my ex-wife into committing perjury for $5,000. But that pity was tempered by the knowledge that his lies could have cost me my children forever. The recording continued playing, and I watched my wife's face crumble as she heard more of the conversation between her son and my ex-wife. What if they ask about the drinking thing? Tyler's voice asked through the speakers. That's perfect because it's impossible to prove either way, Sandra replied. Just say you saw him drinking beer after work and that he got mean when he drank. Stick to that story no matter what. But Dave barely drinks. Like, maybe a beer on weekends. Tyler, do you want that $5,000 or not? Do you want your mom to be happy? Because I promise you, if Dave gets more custody time, he's going to make all your lives miserable. He's controlling. He's angry. I lived with him for 8 years, I know what he's really like. I felt Lisa's hand slip away from mine. When I turned to look at her, she wouldn't meet my eyes. The woman I'd married was listening to her son plan to destroy me, but she was also hearing her ex-husband's ex-wife manipulate a 16-year-old boy with money and lies. Martinez let the recording play for another 30 seconds before stopping it. Tyler, do you need me to replay any part of that conversation? Tyler was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. No, sir. So to be clear, you accepted payment from Ms. Patterson to provide false testimony in this custody hearing? Yes. And the incidents you described earlier, Jake being shaken, the verbal abuse, the drinking, none of those actually happened? Tyler's voice was barely a whisper. No. They didn't happen. Judge Chen leaned forward. Young man, do you understand that you've just admitted to perjury under oath? The courtroom erupted. Kellerman was on his feet demanding a mistrial, Sandra was crying loudly enough for everyone to hear, and the court reporter was typing furiously to keep up with the chaos. But all I could focus on was Lisa, who had buried her face in her hands. Order. Judge Chen's gavel echoed through the room. I'm calling a 30-minute recess. All parties will remain available. Mr. Tyler Morrison, you are not to leave this building or speak to anyone except your mother about this case. Bailiff, please ensure the witness understands these instructions. As the judge left the bench, I finally turned to face Lisa completely. Her mascara had run, leaving dark streaks down her cheeks. Did you know? I asked quietly. She shook her head. Of course I didn't know, Dave. How could you even ask me that? Because your son has been meeting with my ex-wife for weeks, planning to lie in court about me abusing my children. And you never noticed anything suspicious? He said he was at basketball practice. Or studying at friends' houses. Her voice broke. I trusted him. Martinez leaned over. Dave, we need to talk about next steps. This changes everything, but it also complicates things with your current family situation. He was right. Winning the custody case now seemed almost guaranteed, but at what cost? Tyler would likely face charges for perjury. Sandra might face conspiracy charges. And my marriage to Lisa might not survive watching me systematically destroy her son's credibility in open court. There's something else, I said to Martinez, remembering Karen Walsh's text. My investigator found more evidence. I pulled out my phone and quickly checked the email Karen had sent. The blood drained from my face as I read her message. What is it? Lisa asked. I showed Martinez the screen. Bank records showing Sandra had already paid Tyler $1,500 2 weeks ago, with a memo line reading, first installment. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the second payment, made just yesterday morning, $2,000 to Lisa's account, with a memo reading, expenses. My wife had taken money from my ex-wife the day before our custody hearing. I stared at my phone screen, reading Karen's email for the third time, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something less devastating. But there it was in black and white, a $2,000 payment from Sandra's account to Lisa's account, dated yesterday morning at 9:23 a.m. The memo line felt like a knife twisting in my chest, expenses. Dave. Lisa's voice seemed to come from very far away. What did your investigator find? I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. My wife, the woman I'd married 2 years ago, the woman who promised to love and support me through everything, had taken money from my ex-wife the day before our custody hearing. While I was at work yesterday morning, probably reviewing my notes and preparing for today, Lisa was accepting what could only be described as a bribe. Martinez read the email over my shoulder and let out a low whistle. Jesus, Dave. I'm sorry. What is it? Lisa asked again, reaching for my phone. I pulled it away from her. When were you going to tell me about the $2,000 Sandra gave you yesterday? The color drained from Lisa's face so quickly I thought she might faint. How did you? So you're not going to deny it? Dave, it's not what you think. Her voice was shaking. She said it was to help cover Tyler's therapy costs after all this was over. She said testifying would be traumatic for him and he'd need professional help to process it. Therapy costs. I felt something cold and bitter rising in my throat. For the trauma of lying under oath about me abusing my children. I didn't know he was lying. I thought. God, Dave, I really believed you might have been too rough with them sometimes. Tyler seemed so sincere, and Sandra showed me pictures of bruises on Jake's arm. Pictures that were fake. How was I supposed to know that? Tears were streaming down her face now. You've been so stressed about the custody case, so angry all the time. And Tyler was just trying to protect Emma and Jake. The 30-minute recess felt like it was stretching into hours. Around us, the courtroom was mostly empty except for a few court staff and some people waiting for the next case. Sandra and her attorney were huddled in the corner, speaking in urgent whispers. Every few seconds, Sandra would glance over at me with an expression that had shifted from triumphant to desperate. Lisa, you took money from my ex-wife the day before she was trying to take my children away from me. Do you understand how that looks? It wasn't about the custody case. It was about Tyler's mental health. $2,000 for therapy that wouldn't even be needed if your son hadn't committed perjury. Martinez cleared his throat. Dave, I hate to interrupt, but we need to discuss strategy. The judge is going to want to know if Lisa had any knowledge of the conspiracy. I looked at my wife, really looked at her. Her makeup was smeared, her carefully styled hair was falling out of its clip, and she looked smaller somehow, diminished. 2 hours ago, she'd been sitting beside me as my partner, my supporter in this fight for my children. Now I didn't know what she was. Did you know Tyler was meeting with Sandra? I asked. No. I swear I didn't know. But you knew something was wrong. You had to. Tyler's behavior has been escalating for months. Lisa wiped her nose with a tissue. I thought it was normal teenage acting out. His father left when he was 12, and then I married you, and suddenly he had to share me with your kids every week. I thought he was just adjusting. By stealing from your purse. By going through my office. You never told me about the office thing. That was true. I'd caught Tyler photographing documents 2 months ago, but I'd handled it quietly, not wanting to cause problems between Lisa and her son. Instead, I'd installed the security system and started watching him more carefully. And the $60 that went missing from your wallet? Tyler said he found it on the street. You believe that? I wanted to believe it. Her voice broke completely. Dave, he's my baby. He's all I had before I met you. I know that sounds terrible, but when your child tells you something, you want to believe them. Even when part of you knows they're lying. Martinez was checking his watch. We've got maybe 10 more minutes before we're back on the record. Dave, I need to know, do you want to pursue this information about Lisa's payment? It was a loaded question. Bringing up Lisa's $2,000 payment would further damage Sandra's credibility and strengthen our case. It would also destroy what was left of my marriage and probably send my wife into a complete emotional breakdown in open court. But my children were at stake. Emma and Jake, who trusted me to protect them, who needed their father in their lives. There's something else I need to tell you, Lisa said quietly. Something I should have mentioned weeks ago. My stomach dropped. What now? Sandra called me about 6 weeks ago. She said she was worried about Emma and Jake, that you'd been drinking more and losing your temper. She asked if I'd noticed any changes in your behavior. And I told her you'd been stressed about work in the custody case, but that I'd never seen you lose your temper with the kids. I told her she was wrong. Lisa looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. But then Tyler started telling me things. Little things. That you'd snapped at Jake for leaving toys out. That Emma seemed scared when you raised your voice about homework. Nothing dramatic, just concerning. So you started doubting me. I started watching more carefully. And Dave, I never saw anything that worried me. You're patient with Emma and Jake, even when they're being difficult. You help with homework, you read bedtime stories, you make them laugh. But Tyler kept insisting. That I was abusive. That you were different when I wasn't around. That you had a temper I didn't see. I felt the pieces clicking into place. Sandra's plan had been more sophisticated than I'd realized. She hadn't just bought Tyler's testimony, she'd used him to plant seeds of doubt in Lisa's mind, slowly undermining my wife's faith in me over weeks. The bailiff appeared at the courtroom door. 5 minutes, folks. Martinez gathered his papers. Dave, I need a decision about the payment to Lisa. I looked at my wife one more time. The woman I'd fallen in love with, who'd brought Tyler into my life as a surly but manageable 14-year-old. The woman who was now caught in the middle of a war between me and my ex-wife, with her son as collateral damage. Use it, I said quietly. Use everything. Because in the end, protecting Emma and Jake had to come first, even if it meant losing everything else. Judge Chin returned to the bench with an expression that could have frozen hell over. The easy, measured pace of the morning's proceedings was gone, replaced by the sharp efficiency of a judge dealing with potential criminal activity in her courtroom. Mr. Martinez, do you have additional evidence you wish to present? Martinez stood, holding a manila envelope I'd never seen before. Yes, Your Honor. Financial records obtained this morning that directly relate to the conspiracy we've just uncovered. My heart hammered as I realized what was about to happen. Lisa sat rigid beside me, her breathing shallow and quick. She knew what was coming too. Your Honor, Martinez continued, these bank records show a pattern of payments from the plaintiff, Ms. Patterson, to both the witness Tyler Morrison and to Mrs. Lisa Morrison, my client's current wife. The sharp intake of breath from Lisa was audible throughout the courtroom. Sandra shot to her feet before her attorney could stop her. She didn't know anything about Tyler's testimony. Sandra shouted. Lisa had nothing to do with this. Judge Chen's gavel came down like a gunshot. Ms. Patterson, you will remain seated and silent, or I will have you removed from my courtroom. I watched my ex-wife sink back into her chair, her face flushed with panic. The woman who'd once been calculating enough to orchestrate this entire scheme was now unraveling in real time, and her outburst had just implicated Lisa even deeper. Mr. Martinez, Judge Chen said coldly, present your evidence. Your Honor, bank records show a $1,500 payment from Sandra Patterson to Tyler Morrison on March 8, with the memo first installment. A second payment of $2,000 was made to Lisa Morrison yesterday morning at 9:23 a.m., with the memo expenses. I felt Lisa's body go completely still beside me. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Mrs. Morrison, Judge Chen said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade, please approach the bench. Lisa's legs seemed barely able to support her as she stood. I wanted to reach out, to steady her, but Martinez put a warning hand on my arm. Mrs. Morrison, did you receive a payment of $2,000 from Ms. Patterson yesterday morning? Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. For what purpose? She said it was for Tyler's therapy costs. After he testified. She said watching the custody battle and having to speak in court would be traumatic for him. And you accepted this payment knowing your son was scheduled to testify against your current husband? The pause stretched for an eternity. Yes, ma'am. Judge Chen's expression could have melted steel. Did you have any knowledge of your son's planned false testimony? No, Your Honor. I believed his testimony would be truthful. But you accepted money from the opposing party in your husband's custody case, the day before that testimony was to be given. Yes. I see how that looks now, but I didn't think about it that way at the time. Sandra's attorney, Kellerman, was frantically whispering to his client, probably explaining how her outburst had just destroyed any chance of protecting Lisa from the conspiracy charges. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Karen Walsh, emergency, found social media messages between Sandra and Tyler going back 8 weeks. Planning started much earlier. Tyler received additional cash payments not showing in bank records. 8 weeks. This conspiracy had been in motion for 2 months, not the few weeks I'd assumed. Every family dinner, every conversation about the custody case, every moment Lisa had comforted me about my stress over potentially losing my children, all of it happening while her son was secretly working with Sandra to destroy me. Tyler was called back to the witness stand, his face blotchy and swollen from crying. Judge Chin questioned him directly about the timeline, and slowly the full scope of the conspiracy emerged. The first meeting with Sandra had been in January, just after the custody hearing was scheduled. The payments had started in February. The lies had been crafted and rehearsed over months. Mr. Morrison, Judge Chin said to Tyler, I'm going to ask you directly, how much money did you receive in total from Ms. Patterson for your false testimony? Tyler's voice cracked. $4,000, ma'am. $1,500 in the bank, and $2,500 in cash over different meetings. $4,000. My 16-year-old stepson had sold out my relationship with my children for $4,000. But the worst revelation was still coming. And did Ms. Patterson give you any other instructions about your testimony? Tyler glanced desperately at Sandra, then at his mother, then at me. She said if the recordings didn't work to convince the judge, I should say I was scared to tell the truth before because Dave had threatened me. She said I should say he told me he'd hurt my mom if I ever said anything about what I saw. The lie that never got told. Sandra had been prepared to have Tyler accuse me of threatening Lisa's safety. If the judge had been less convinced by the earlier testimony, my stepson was ready to paint me as a man who had hurt his own wife to cover up child abuse. I turned to look at Lisa, and saw my own horror reflected in her eyes. This wasn't just about custody anymore. This was about the systematic destruction of my life and reputation, using her son as the weapon. And despite everything, despite the money and the lies and the betrayal, I realized Lisa truly hadn't known the full extent of what was happening in her own home. The question now was whether that ignorance would be enough to save our marriage, or if the damage was already too deep to repair. The recess stretched longer than expected while Judge Chin consulted with the court clerk in what I assumed was the district attorney's office. Perjury in a custody case involving children wasn't something any judge took lightly, and the conspiracy element made it even more serious. Sandra sat alone at her table now. Kellerman had stepped away for a hushed phone conversation that involved a lot of head shaking and frustrated gestures. I caught fragments, never disclosed. Complete liability. Withdrawing representation. Tyler remained in the hallway with the victim's advocate, though at this point it was unclear whether he was a victim or a perpetrator. Lisa had barely spoken since returning from the bench, just sat staring at her hands while tears dripped steadily onto her skirt. My phone buzzed with another message from Karen Walsh, DA's office is reviewing for charges. Sandra's ex-husband contacted me, apparently she pulled similar stunts during their divorce. He's willing to testify about pattern of behavior. Sandra had done this before. The woman I'd been married to for 8 years, who I thought I knew completely, had a history of manipulating court proceedings. It made me wonder what other lies I believed during our marriage, what other schemes I'd been blind to. Dave, Lisa whispered, finally breaking her silence. I need you to know something else. My stomach clenched. What now? Last week, Sandra called while you were at work. She said she wanted to apologize for making the custody battle so difficult. She invited Tyler and me to lunch. The blood in my veins turned to ice. You had lunch with my ex-wife? While we're in the middle of a custody case. She said she wanted to clear the air, that maybe we could work something out that would be better for Emma and Jake. Less conflict. Lisa's voice was getting smaller with each word. Tyler was excited about it. He said Sandra was really nice, that she understood how hard the divorce had been on everyone. What did you tell her? Nothing important. Just that you've been stressed, working late, worried about the legal fees. Normal stuff. Lisa finally looked at me, her eyes desperate. But Dave, she asked a lot of questions about your daily routine. When you left for work, when you got home, whether you ever worked from the house. The security system. Sandra had been gathering intelligence about my schedule to help Tyler know when it was safe to meet with her. Every casual question Lisa had answered innocently had been ammunition for the conspiracy against me. Did you tell her about the cameras? What cameras? The security system I installed last month. Lisa stared at me in shock. You installed cameras in our house? When? Why didn't you tell me? Because your son was stealing from you and going through my office. Because I needed to protect myself and my case. You were spying on us. I was protecting myself from exactly what just happened in that courtroom. Martinez returned to our table with a grim expression. Dave, we need to discuss plea arrangements. Plea arrangements? For Tyler. The DA is definitely filing charges. Perjury, conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly extortion depending on how they interpret the threat component. He's 16, but this is serious enough they might try him as an adult. I looked toward the hallway where Tyler sat hunched over, looking younger than his 16 years. Despite everything he'd done, despite the lies and the money and the systematic betrayal, he was still just a kid who'd been manipulated by a clever adult with her own agenda. What kind of plea? Community service, probation, restitution to cover your legal fees. If he cooperates fully with the investigation into Sandra's activities. Lisa grabbed my arm. Dave, please. He's my son. He made a terrible mistake, but he's still my baby. Your baby tried to destroy my relationship with my children. Sandra manipulated him. She preyed on a 16-year-old boy with money and lies. She was right, of course. But Tyler had made choices too. He'd chosen money over family. He'd chosen to rehearse lies about child abuse. He'd chosen to sit in that witness chair and try to convince a judge that I was dangerous to my own children. The bailiff appeared again. Judge is ready to resume. As we filed back into the courtroom, I caught Sandra's eye one final time. The woman who'd shared my bed for 8 years, who'd given birth to my children, was looking at me with something that might have been regret. But it was too late for regret now. The machine she'd set in motion was about to destroy more than just our custody arrangement. It was about to shatter 2 families completely. Judge Chin returned to the bench with 2 additional people I didn't recognize, a stern-looking woman in a gray suit and a younger man with a briefcase. The atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted from civil proceedings to something that felt almost criminal. Ladies and gentlemen, I've consulted with the district attorney's office regarding the events that have transpired here today. Ms. Rodriguez from the DA's office will be observing the remainder of these proceedings. The woman in gray nodded curtly. Sandra had gone completely pale. Before we continue, Judge Chin announced, I want to make something absolutely clear. This court takes perjury and conspiracy extremely seriously, particularly when it involves the welfare of minor children. Mr. Tyler Morrison, you are not required to answer any further questions without an attorney present. Tyler's voice cracked when he spoke. I want to tell the truth now, Your Honor. All of it. Martinez leaned over to me. This is good for us, but it's about to get very ugly for your family. Tyler straightened in the witness chair, looking somehow both older and younger than his 16 years. Your Honor, Sandra Patterson contacted me in January through Instagram. She said she was worried about Emma and Jake, and that she needed someone on the inside to document what was really happening. What did she mean by document? Judge Chin asked. Take pictures if I saw bruises. Record conversations if Dave was drinking or yelling. She said courts don't always believe mothers, so she needed independent witnesses. I felt sick. Sandra had been grooming my stepson for months, turning him into a spy in my own home. But I never saw any of the things she was looking for, Tyler continued. Dave doesn't really drink much, maybe a beer with dinner on weekends. He's actually pretty patient with Emma and Jake, even when they're being annoying. Lisa made a small choking sound beside me. So what did you tell Ms. Patterson when you couldn't find evidence of abuse? Tyler's hands were shaking. At first, I told her the truth, that Dave seemed like a normal dad. But she said that abusers are good at hiding their behavior, and that I needed to look harder. She started paying me $100 a week just for surveillance. $100 a week. Sandra had been funding a 4-month investigation into my parenting, using my own stepson as her informant. When did the plan change from surveillance to false testimony? The judge asked. About 6 weeks ago. Sandra said the surveillance wasn't enough, that courts needed specific incidents to make custody decisions. She said sometimes you have to enhance the truth to protect children from subtle abuse that's hard to prove. The euphemisms were chilling. Enhance the truth. Independent witnesses. Sandra had carefully crafted language that made conspiracy sound like child protection. She showed me court documents from other cases, pointed out how judges responded to certain types of testimony. She said emotional details were more convincing than general complaints. Ms. Rodriguez from the DA's office was taking notes furiously. Whatever Tyler was describing sounded like Sandra had experience with this kind of manipulation. Tyler, Judge Chin said gently, did Ms. Patterson ever threaten you if you refused to participate? Tyler glanced at his mother, then at me. Not directly. But she said if Dave got more custody time, he'd probably make my mom's life miserable. She said controlling men always take their anger out on their families when they don't get their way. She made it sound like I was protecting my mom by helping her. Lisa was crying silently now, understanding for the first time how thoroughly Sandra had manipulated her son's protective instincts. And the money increased when you agreed to testify? Yeah. She said it was payment for therapy I'd need after court, but really it was a bonus for going through with the lies. Judge Chin looked directly at Sandra. Ms. Patterson, you have the right to remain silent, but if you wish to respond to these allegations, now would be the time. Sandra stood slowly, her composure completely shattered. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I was trying to protect my children, Your Honor. I genuinely believed Dave was a threat to them. It was a lie, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. Judge Chen's expression didn't soften even slightly at Sandra's words. Ms. Patterson, the evidence suggests this was a calculated scheme spanning several months, involving monetary payments and coached false testimony. That hardly supports a claim of genuine concern for child welfare. Sandra's attorney, what was left of him, finally stood up. Your Honor, my client wishes to invoke her Fifth Amendment rights at this time. Too late for that, Ms. Rodriguez said sharply from her seat. Ms. Patterson just made a statement on the record. I watched my ex-wife realize she just incriminated herself further. The woman who'd been clever enough to orchestrate a months-long conspiracy had panicked at the crucial moment and handed the prosecution exactly what they needed. But Tyler wasn't finished. Your Honor, there's something else. Sandra didn't just coach me on what to say about Dave. She also told me what to say if anyone asked about my mom taking money. Lisa's head snapped up. What? Tyler couldn't meet his mother's eyes. Sandra said if the payment to you came up, I should say you were completely innocent. That she tricked you into accepting money by claiming it was for my therapy. She said it would be more believable if you seemed like another victim instead of a co-conspirator. The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. Even Sandra's attempt to protect her had been calculated manipulation, designed to make Lisa appear sympathetic while keeping the conspiracy intact. But Mom, Tyler continued, his voice breaking, Sandra also said that if her plan worked and Dave lost custody, you'd be happier. She said you told her at lunch that the stress of the custody battle was putting strain on your marriage. I turned to stare at Lisa. You told Sandra our marriage was strained? She asked how I was handling everything. I said it was hard watching you worry about losing Emma and Jake. That's all. What else did you tell her at this lunch I'm just hearing about? Martinez put a warning hand on my arm, but I was past caring about courtroom decorum. Dave, please, not here, Lisa whispered. But Judge Chen was looking at Lisa with renewed interest. Mrs. Morrison, I think the court would benefit from hearing about this lunch meeting with Ms. Patterson. Lisa's hands were shaking as she stood. It was last Tuesday. Sandra said she wanted to apologize for making things so difficult, that maybe we could find a solution that worked for everyone. And you believe this? I wanted to. I hate conflict, and Tyler was excited about meeting her. He said she seemed really nice when they'd talked. My blood ran cold. When had Tyler talked to Sandra before the lunch? Tyler's face went white. Mom, I wasn't supposed to tell you that. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Sandra had been in contact with Tyler for months, but Lisa had only known about one lunch meeting. My wife had been kept in the dark about the full extent of her son's relationship with my ex-wife. Tyler, Judge Chin said firmly, how many times did you meet or speak with Ms. Patterson before that lunch with your mother? Maybe, 15 times. Sometimes she'd pick me up after basketball practice. Sometimes we'd meet at Starbucks when I told Mom I was studying with friends. 15 secret meetings. For months, while Lisa thought her son was at practice or studying, he'd been conspiring with my ex-wife to destroy my custody case. Lisa sank back into her chair like she'd been shot. Tyler, how could you lie to me for months? Sandra said it had to be secret until we were sure Dave was really a threat to Emma and Jake. She said if you knew too early, you might accidentally warn him and he'd get better at hiding the abuse. The web of lies was so intricate, so carefully constructed, that I almost had to admire Sandra's thoroughness. She'd isolated Tyler from his mother, created a secret relationship built on money and manipulation, and convinced him that lying to everyone who loved him was actually heroic. Ms. Rodriguez stood up. Your Honor, based on what we've heard today, the state will be filing charges against Ms. Patterson for conspiracy, subordination of perjury, and child endangerment. We'll also be investigating similar patterns in her previous divorce proceedings. Previous divorce proceedings. Karen had been right, Sandra had done this before. As the judge called another recess to confer with the DA's office, I realized that while I was probably going to win the custody case, everything else in my life was falling apart. My stepson was facing criminal charges. My wife had been betrayed by her own child and inadvertently aided the woman trying to destroy me. And my ex-wife was about to be arrested in open court. The only question left was whether there would be anything of my current family left to salvage when this was all over. The 30-minute recess stretched into an hour as Ms. Rodriguez huddled with Judge Chen and what appeared to be additional personnel from the DA's office. I watched through the courtroom windows as two uniformed officers took positions near the exits. This wasn't just about custody anymore, Sandra was about to be arrested. Martinez returned from his own consultation with the prosecutor looking grim. Dave, they want to interview you about any other incidents of manipulation or fraud during your marriage to Sandra. Apparently, her ex-husband before you has come forward with similar stories. Her ex-husband before me. My head was spinning. Sandra was married before our marriage. For 3 years, from 2010 to 2013. She apparently tried to fabricate evidence of domestic violence during the divorce too, but it fell apart when her own sister testified against her. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. The woman I'd lived with for 8 years, who'd given birth to my children, had an entire history I'd never known about. How had I missed something that significant? Lisa overheard and turned to stare at me. Dave, didn't you know about her first marriage? She told me there had been a brief relationship in her early 20s that didn't work out. Not a marriage. I was remembering our early conversations, how Sandra had painted herself as someone who'd focused on career over relationships until she met me. She said I was her first real commitment. Tyler, who was sitting in the hallway with the victim's advocate, caught my attention through the glass door. He was writing something on a legal pad, his hand moving frantically across the page. When he finished, he handed it to the advocate, who immediately walked toward the prosecutor's table. What now? I muttered. The advocate whispered to Ms. Rodriguez, who read Tyler's note and then looked directly at Sandra with an expression of disgust. Whatever Tyler had just revealed, it was bad enough to shock a seasoned prosecutor. Sandra noticed the attention and began fidgeting with her jewelry, the nervous habit I remembered from our marriage whenever she was caught in a lie. She'd twist her wedding ring when the credit card bills came in higher than expected, or fidget with her earrings when I questioned her about suspicious phone calls. My phone buzzed with another message from Karen Walsh, found Sandra's sealed juvenile record. 3 instances of false reporting between ages 14 to 17. Pattern goes back decades. Sandra had been making false accusations since she was a teenager. The scope of her deception was staggering, and I'd been blind to all of it. Mr. Martinez, the bailiff called out, Judge Chen is ready to resume. As we filed back in, I noticed Sandra's attorney wasn't with her anymore. She sat alone at the plaintiff's table, occasionally glancing toward the exit doors where the officers stood waiting. Judge Chen's expression was thunderous as she took the bench. Ladies and gentlemen, new information has come to light that significantly impacts these proceedings. She held up Tyler's handwritten note. The witness has provided additional details about Ms. Patterson's instructions, specifically regarding Coach's testimony about alleged threats made by the defendant. I felt my stomach drop. What else had Sandra planned that we hadn't uncovered yet? Mr. Tyler Morrison has informed the court that Ms. Patterson instructed him to claim, if pressed under cross-examination, that the defendant had threatened to falsely accuse Tyler himself of inappropriate behavior toward the younger children if Tyler ever spoke against him. The courtroom went dead silent except for Lisa's sharp intake of breath. Sandra had been prepared to have my stepson accuse me of threatening to fabricate child molestation charges. It was a lie so twisted, so evil in its calculation, that even I was stunned by its cruelty. Judge Chen continued, this represents not just perjury, but an attempt to destroy the defendant's reputation and relationship with his children through the most serious false allegations possible. I looked at Sandra, really looked at her, and saw a complete stranger. The silence in the courtroom felt suffocating as Judge Chen's words sank in. Sandra had been prepared to have Tyler accuse me of threatening to fabricate child molestation charges against him. The sheer malice of it left me speechless. Lisa was staring at her son through the glass door, her face a mixture of horror and disbelief. Tyler wouldn't meet her eyes, hunched over in his chair like he was trying to disappear. Ms. Rodriguez stood up, holding what appeared to be a thick file folder. Your Honor, the state has uncovered additional evidence that speaks to a pattern of fraudulent behavior spanning over 15 years. Sandra's hands were shaking visibly now, her carefully applied makeup streaked with tears. The confident woman who'd orchestrated months of manipulation was completely falling apart. Between 1998 and 2001, when she was Sandra Mitchell, the defendant made 3 separate false reports to police claiming domestic violence by different boyfriends. In 2013, during her divorce from Thomas Patterson, a marriage Mr. Morrison was apparently unaware of, she attempted to fabricate evidence of physical abuse including staged photographs and coached witness testimony from her own sister. My world tilted. Sandra Patterson wasn't even her real name. She'd been Sandra Mitchell, and she'd had a whole marriage I'd never known about. The sister, Jennifer Mitchell, eventually recanted and testified that Sandra had paid her to lie in court. Sound familiar? Judge Chen was taking notes furiously. Ms. Rodriguez, are you telling me the plaintiff has a 15-year history of filing false reports and manufacturing evidence in domestic relations cases? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Your Honor. We believe Mr. Morrison is at least the 4th man Sandra Mitchell has targeted with false allegations during relationship disputes. I felt physically sick. How many other men had Sandra destroyed with her lies? How many children had been used as weapons in her schemes? Lisa suddenly stood up, swaying slightly. I can't. She rushed toward the courtroom doors. Martinez grabbed my arm as I started to follow her. Let her go, Dave. You need to hear this. Ms. Rodriguez continued, Your Honor, we've also discovered that the defendant has been receiving disability payments under the name Sandra Mitchell for alleged PTSD from domestic violence that our investigation suggests never occurred. Disability fraud. Sandra had been collecting government benefits based on lies about abuse that she'd fabricated herself. The woman was a career criminal, and I'd been married to her for 8 years without suspecting anything. Furthermore, Ms. Rodriguez said, opening another folder, financial records show that Sandra Mitchell, aka Patterson, has received over $180,000 in various settlements and insurance payouts related to these false claims over the past decade. $180,000. Sandra had turned false accusations into a business model. Tyler's victim advocate handed another note to the prosecutor, who read it and shook her head grimly. Your Honor, the witness has just informed us that Ms. Patterson offered him an additional $10,000 if the custody case resulted in supervised visitation only for Mr. Morrison. She also promised to help him apply for college scholarships, claiming she had connections from previous cases. Sandra had done this so many times she had a network of resources for her accomplices. Judge Chin set down her pen and looked directly at Sandra. Ms. Patterson, or Ms. Mitchell, or whatever your legal name actually is, you will stand. Sandra rose unsteadily, her face completely white. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit perjury, suborning perjury, fraud, and child endangerment. Officers, please take the defendant into custody. As the handcuffs clicked around Sandra's wrists, I realized that winning the custody case was now the least of my concerns. Emma and Jake's mother was being arrested as a career criminal, and I was going to have to explain to my 7- and 5-year-old children why mommy couldn't see them anymore. The devastation was complete, and this was only the beginning. The sound of handcuffs clicking around Sandra's wrists echoed through the silent courtroom like gunshots. As the officers led her away, she turned back one last time, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before, not remorse, not fear, but cold calculation. Even now, even caught red-handed with 15 years of fraud exposed, she was already planning her next move. Dave. Tyler's voice was barely a whisper as he appeared beside me. The victim's advocate had brought him back into the courtroom. There's more. Things I haven't told anyone yet. My blood turned to ice. What kind of things? Tyler's hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone. Sandra made me record some of our conversations. She said it was to protect both of us if anyone questioned our story. But I think she was planning to use the recordings against me if I backed out. Martinez immediately stepped closer. Tyler, don't say another word without your attorney present. But Tyler was already scrolling through his phone. She has recordings of me agreeing to lie. Hours of them. She said if I ever tried to tell the truth, she'd make sure everyone heard how eager I was to help destroy Dave's reputation. Insurance. Sandra hadn't just manipulated Tyler, she created evidence to blackmail him into silence if he ever developed a conscience. Ms. Rodriguez overheard and approached our table. Son, we're going to need those recordings, but Mr. Martinez is right. You need legal representation before you say anything else. Tyler looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. Dave, she showed me pictures of other kids who'd helped her before. Kids who got college scholarships and jobs after they testified. She made it seem like I was joining some kind of success program. Other kids. Sandra had been recruiting minors for her fraud schemes for years, possibly decades. The scope of her criminal enterprise was staggering. Where is your mother? I asked Tyler, suddenly realizing Lisa hadn't returned. She's in the bathroom. She's been throwing up for the last 10 minutes. I found Lisa in the hallway outside the women's restroom, sitting on a bench with her head in her hands. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, and I was shocked by how much she'd aged in the past hour. The woman I'd married looked like she'd lived 3 years of trauma in a single afternoon. I gave her information about you, Lisa said without preamble. Every innocent conversation we had about your schedule, your work stress, your relationship with Emma and Jake. I fed her ammunition for months without knowing it. I sat down beside her, maintaining careful distance. Lisa, you couldn't have known. But I should have known something was wrong when Tyler started spending so much time studying and coming home with new clothes and electronics. A 16-year-old doesn't suddenly become a model student and start spending money from thin air. She was right, of course. The signs had been there if we'd been looking for them. Dave, Tyler just told me something else while we were waiting for court to resume. Lisa's voice dropped to barely audible. Sandra offered to help him get emancipated if this case went badly. She had legal papers already drawn up. My heart stopped. Emancipated? She was going to steal my son completely. Make him legally independent and then control him through money and promises. Lisa looked at me with desperate eyes. She wasn't just trying to destroy your relationship with your children. She was planning to take mine too. The true scope of Sandra's plan crystallized in that moment. She hadn't just wanted custody of Emma and Jake, she'd wanted to dismantle both of our families entirely, leaving us isolated and broken while she collected her payoffs and moved on to her next target. The question now was whether Tyler and I could survive what she'd already set in motion. Martinez returned from another huddle with the prosecution team, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. Dave, we need to talk. Now. He pulled me aside while Lisa remained on the bench, still looking like she might collapse at any moment. The DA's office just got a call from Family Services, Martinez said quietly. Given Sandra's arrest and a criminal conspiracy involving Tyler, they're opening an emergency investigation into the safety of Emma and Jake. My world tilted sideways. What does that mean? It means until they can verify that the children haven't been exposed to Sandra's criminal behavior or coaching, they're recommending supervised visits for everyone. Including you. Supervised visits. But I'm the victim here. I'm the one who exposed the conspiracy. Dave, your children have been living with a woman who just got arrested for a 15-year pattern of fraud and false accusations. Family Services has to assume Sandra may have been coaching Emma and Jake the same way she coached Tyler. The irony was devastating. By proving Sandra's manipulation, I potentially triggered a process that could keep me from my children anyway. Emma and Jake might be questioned about whether their mother had taught them to lie about me, subjected to interviews and psychological evaluations, traumatized by the very system meant to protect them. Tyler appeared in the hallway, flanked by his court-appointed attorney and the victim's advocate. His face was red and blotchy, but there was something different in his posture now, less defiance, more genuine remorse. Dave, he said, his voice cracking, can I talk to you for a minute? His attorney immediately stepped forward. Tyler, remember what we discussed about limiting statements until... I don't care about legal strategy right now, Tyler interrupted. I need to tell Dave something. I looked at this kid who'd systematically tried to destroy my life for $4,000, and realized I felt more pity than anger. Sandra had found a vulnerable teenager dealing with his parents' divorce and his mother's remarriage, and she'd exploited every insecurity he had. What is it, Tyler? Sandra made me practice testifying in front of a video camera. Hours and hours of practice sessions. She said judges could tell when kids were lying unless they rehearsed enough to make it seem natural. Tyler's hands were shaking again. But she also recorded me admitting the stories were fake. She said it was for quality control, but I think she was making sure I could never back out without destroying myself. Insurance files. Sandra had been creating blackmail material on a 16-year-old boy, ensuring his permanent cooperation through mutual destruction. There's something else, Tyler continued, glancing nervously at his attorney. Sandra didn't just coach me about fake abuse stories. She told me specific things to say about Emma and Jake if anyone questioned whether they were being coached too. My blood ran cold. What kind of things? She said if Family Services got involved, I should tell them that Emma once asked me why Daddy was so mean and that Jake had nightmares about you yelling. Back up lies to make it seem like your kids were already showing signs of trauma. Even from jail, Sandra's manipulation was still unfolding. She'd anticipated every possible outcome and prepared Tyler with lies designed to poison any investigation into her behavior. Lisa overheard from the bench and let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. Tyler, how could you agree to lie about Emma and Jake? They're innocent babies. Mom, I thought I was protecting them. Sandra showed me pictures of bruises on other kids, told me stories about fathers who seemed nice but hurt their children when no one was watching. She made me believe Dave was dangerous. The pictures of bruises. More manufactured evidence, probably from Sandra's previous cases or staged entirely. She'd built a library of fake documentation spanning years. Martinez checked his watch. Family Services wants to interview Tyler this afternoon about any contact he's had with Emma and Jake. They need to know if Sandra coached him to influence the children's perceptions of their father. As we prepared to return to the courtroom for final custody determinations, I realized that exposing Sandra's conspiracy had triggered a cascade of investigations that might take months to resolve. Emma and Jake were about to be thrust into the same system that had almost destroyed me, and there was nothing I could do to protect them from the aftermath of their mother's crimes. The victory I'd fought for was turning into a nightmare that would traumatize everyone I loved. 3 months later, I sat in Judge Chen's courtroom for what I hoped would be the final time. The media attention had died down, the criminal proceedings were moving forward, and today would determine the permanent custody arrangement for Emma and Jake. The past 12 weeks had been a whirlwind of investigations, interviews, and revelations. Sandra's criminal enterprise had unraveled completely. The FBI had found evidence of at least 12 other men she targeted over the years, with total fraudulent settlements exceeding $400,000. She was facing federal charges now, looking at 15 to 20 years in prison. Tyler sat in the gallery behind me, wearing the navy blue suit Lisa had bought him for community service events. His plea agreement had been finalized last week: 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and restitution of $8,000 to cover my legal fees. More importantly, his cooperation had helped the FBI build their case against Sandra. All rise, the bailiff announced as Judge Chin entered. Lisa squeezed my hand. We'd spent the last 3 months in intensive counseling, rebuilding trust that Sandra had systematically destroyed. The revelation that Tyler had been manipulated for months while Lisa remained unaware had actually strengthened our marriage in unexpected ways. We were both victims of Sandra's manipulation, and we'd chosen to heal together rather than let her destroy us from prison. Mr. Morrison, Judge Chin began, the Family Services investigation has concluded that Emma and Jake showed no signs of coaching or manipulation regarding their relationship with you. In fact, their consistent positive statements about their father remained unchanged throughout multiple interviews. Relief flooded through me. My children had been protected from Sandra's poison, at least directly. Furthermore, the psychological evaluations indicate both children are remarkably resilient and have maintained strong emotional bonds with both parents despite the circumstances. Emma and Jake had been living with my parents during the investigation, visiting me daily but sleeping in the stability my mom and dad provided. They'd handled the situation better than any of us, with the natural adaptability that 7 and 5-year-olds possessed. However, Judge Chin continued, given Ms. Mitchell's incarceration and expected lengthy sentence, this court awards sole physical and legal custody of Emma Marie Morrison and Jacob David Morrison to their father, David Morrison, effective immediately. I closed my eyes and felt tears I'd been holding back for months finally fall. My children were safe. They were mine. Sandra's conspiracy had backfired so completely that instead of losing them, I'd gained full custody. Tyler Morrison, Judge Chin said, addressing my stepson directly, please stand. Tyler rose, his hands clasped behind his back in the respectful posture his probation officer had taught him. Young man, you made terrible choices, but you also found the courage to tell the truth when it mattered most. Your cooperation has helped prevent other families from suffering what yours endured. I hope you've learned that integrity, once lost, is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. Yes, ma'am. I have. Tyler had changed during the investigation. The entitled teenager who'd sold out his family for $4,000 had been replaced by someone who understood consequences. He'd written letters of apology to Emma and Jake, started therapy to address his own manipulation trauma, and was working weekends at a legal aid clinic as part of his community service. As we left the courthouse, Tyler hung back while Lisa and I walked ahead. Dave, he called out. Thank you. I turned back to him. For what? For not giving up on our family. Sandra told me you'd throw me away the first chance you got, that stepdads never really cared about their wife's kids. His voice was steady now, mature in a way that 3 months of consequences had forced. But you could have destroyed me completely with those recordings, and instead you helped me get a plea deal that gives me a future. The truth was, I'd realized that Sandra had victimized Tyler almost as much as she'd victimized me. A 16-year-old boy approached by a manipulative adult with money and sob stories about child protection didn't stand much of a chance. Your family, Tyler. Family fights for each other, even when they screw up. As we walked toward our car, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma, sent from my mother's phone. Daddy, Jacob and I packed our favorite stuffies to come home tonight. Grammy made us cookies for dessert at our real house. Our real house. Despite everything Sandra had put us through, despite the lies and manipulation and criminal conspiracy, my children still considered our home their safe place. The recording devices that had saved my custody case were long gone now, but the truth they preserved had given me everything that mattered. Sandra's lies had been exposed, my children were coming home, and my family, scarred but intact, was finally free from her manipulation. As I started the car, Tyler in the back seat and Lisa beside me, I realized Sandra had been wrong about one crucial thing: the truth really had set us free.